Hi, Algebra! Here we are with my fancy tablet, and I am ready to talk to you about the anatomy of the Cartesian plane. So I'm going to draw. When I draw this, most students call this just a graph, but the name for this is the Cartesian plane. So I have a vertical line here, and it's not just a line, but it's actually a vertical number line. And then I have a horizontal line here. And I'm going to draw some arrows. Oops. Yikes. Don't do that. Okay. I'm going to draw some arrows on the ends of my number lines here to show you that these go off and off into infinity. So on my number line, we would call this one here the x-axis. And it's just a number line like you're used to. I have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, dot, dot, dot. That arrow shows that we just keep going on and on into infinity. And then on the negative part, I have -1, -2, -3, -4, dot, dot, dot. That's going off into infinity in the negative direction. And then I have another number line here that's oriented vertically, which means up and down. And that's called the y-axis. And so this time the positive numbers go up, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, dot, 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 off into infinity. And down here we have -1. Oops. It's actually right in there. -1, -2, -3, -4, and down. And so this is our x and y axis. And you use this Cartesian plane to draw graphs, to find points, and I'll show you a little bit more about how that works. So you notice when I drew those two lines, when I drew my x and y axis, I kind of divided my paper up into 4 different pieces. You would say maybe even 4 quadrants. And so we would call this quadrant 1, and we would call this quadrant 2. We would call this quadrant 3. And we would call this quadrant 4. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of our graph, of our quadrant system. And so this is the anatomy of the Cartesian plane. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to plot points on our Cartesian plane. So let me draw us another one here. This ruler is actually helping me to do a much neater graph than I've probably ever done before. So that's something for today. That can be my win for today's online learning. So there's my x-axis, and here's my y-axis. And there's my arrows to show that we keep going. We just keep going forever and ever in all directions. And I want to show you, here I'm going to give us some numbers so that we know what we're working with. 4, 5. Here we have -1. Oh, that's a little bit too big. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then right in there, -1, -2, -3, -4. Great. So this is our graph. So when I say plot points on the graph, this is what I mean. Let's say I tell you to go in the x direction, a distance of 2. I want you to go to the 2 in the x direction on the number line. So here we are. Now we're at 2 in the x direction. And then after that I say, excuse me guys, go 3 in the y direction. So then I would go, sorry guys, I'm still learning this thing. Up 1, 2, 3, and then that's where I would end. And so this point, we would actually name this point In the x direction, I went 2, and in the y direction, I went 3. So here's the y direction, and here's the x direction. And so that would be called the point 2, 3. So I'm going to pick another point randomly, and then I want you to try to see if you can figure out how we would call that point. So pause the video and see if you can figure out what that point is. Got it? Okay. So here's how we will write it. The first space here is going to tell us how far in the x direction. And then after the comma, the space here is going to tell us how far in the y direction. So let's see. To get to this point, I need to go -1, -2, -3. And then I need to go down -2. So then this point here would be -3, -2. Great. There's one special point I want to draw your attention to. It's got a special name, so I'm going to put it in green here. This point, right where our x and y axis cross each other, right where they meet. So this point right here, I went 0 distance. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't go to +1, +2. I didn't go to -1, -2. I'm at the point 0 on my number line for the x direction and 0 for the y direction. So the point 0, 0 is called the origin. It's called the origin point. It's got a special name. Okay, so that's it. That's how you graph points. I want to show us a few patterns when it comes to that quadrant system that we talked about before. And then I will move us on to the next video. Let's change our lines and grids to be a little bit bigger so I have some more room to work. Great. So here's my ruler, and we'll put it right on this line. That is my y-axis. And that is my x-axis. And I'll show you guys this on this graph. I've been labeling everything in units of 1, but I could count by 2s or count by 3s or something like that. So I could say, here's the point 2, 4, 6, 8. And here's the point -2 on this number line. -4, -6, -8. And then here's 2, 4, 6, 2, 4, 6. And now the trick there is I can only do that if the scale, something called the scale, is the same. Scale must be the same. And I'll show you what I mean by scale. So the distance here from 0 to 2 is the same as the distance here from 4 to 6. I'm always going up by 2. I'm never going like up by 2, then up by 7, then up by 4, then up by 3. Each point on my number line is equally spaced apart. But I promised I would show you something about quadrants. So I'm going to go ahead and undo. The scale must be the same. Don't forget. I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to show you something about the quadrants. There's actually a pattern when it comes to points in each quadrant. So I want you to take a look. We'll use green for positive here. So I'm going to use my highlighter in green, and I'm going to highlight the number lines where they're positive. So from 0 onward in this direction. Oh my goodness. I know my storage is full, and I'm not going to upgrade. Apple. So my x-axis has a positive number line here, and my y-axis has a positive number line here. And then I'm going to go ahead and highlight in red where I have negative numbers. So my y-axis has negative number line here. I realize I forgot the negative symbol. And negative numbers here. Let's go ahead and add those back in. That's confusing. -2, -4, -6. So when I'm in quadrant 1, sometimes I'll show you the abbreviation we use. So in quadrant 1, a lot of times they'll just write Q1 like that. So when I'm in quadrant 1, notice that my x-axis for all of these points is positive, and my y-axis for all of these points is positive. Like if I pick a point here, it looks like if we're estimating, that's about the point 3, 3. The x and y value are positive. If I pick a point here, 2, 4, the x and y value are positive. If I pick a point here, 8, 4, the x and y value are positive, right? Because anytime I'm right here is my x value, and here is my y value. And so for all of those, Q1, the x and y values are both going to be positive. And there's a similar pattern for each of these quadrants. Here in quadrant 2, sometimes they use Roman numerals when they're talking about quadrants. I'll do that here. This is just the Roman numeral for 2. So here I am in quadrant 2, and I have a different pattern, but it's still a pattern. So notice that my x values on this x-axis are all negative. This is the negative part of my x number line. And my y values are all positive. So any of my coordinates, the first number, the x value, is going to be negative, and the y value is going to be positive. So if I pick a point randomly in quadrant 2, this one, it looks like that's about -5, +2, right there. And so the x value, that's the first number. Oops, sorry, I wanted that to be the highlighter. The x value, our first number, is negative, and the y value is positive. And that's going to be true for all points in quadrant 2. So to show that, I'm going to say red and then green, because the first number, the x value, is negative, and the second number, the y value, is positive. And then I think you can guess quadrant 3. This is just the Roman numeral for 3 that I'm showing you here. Sometimes they abbreviate quadrants in this way. Quadrant 3 and quadrant 1 are kind of opposites of each other, because notice here we have quadrant 3, the x-axis is negative and the y-axis is negative. So if I choose a point at random here, any of these points, this looks like it would be about -3, -3. Hopefully you see how I picked that. If not, ask me a question and I'll try to make a video about it. So the point -3, -3 is here. And notice that both the x value and the y value are negative. So in quadrant 3, the x value and the y value of all those points are all negative. Just like how in quadrant 1, the x and y values were all positive, in quadrant 3, they're all negative. And so last but not least, let's take a look at quadrant 4. And what I think is interesting, this is just the Roman numeral for 4. Sometimes, like I said, they do quadrants like that. So quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 are sort of opposites of each other. And quadrant 3 and quadrant 4 are sort of opposites of each other. Let's pick a point at random here and see what we can see. So this point, gosh, I must love 3s. Look, this looks like it's right about, on the x direction, it looks like it's about +3. And in the y direction, it looks like it's about -3. So here I have 3, -3. If I picked another point, this looks like it's about 8, -4. So notice here that in the x direction, it's always going to be positive. So this first number is really always going to be positive here. And in the y direction, it's always negative. So to show that, the x is the first number. We'll color the q in green, and we'll color the red for the Roman numeral so that you could see the x value, the first number is always positive, and the y value, the second number, is always negative. So that's just a little bit about the Cartesian plane. A cute story about the Cartesian plane that I want to tell you guys is that Rene Descartes, who was one of the people who first codified this and wrote it down, there's a story that says that he was watching a fly, a little fly, crawl across his ceiling. And his ceiling had a lot of lines in it, cracks. It had lines like this and then bigger lines like that. And he was just watching this fly crawl across his ceiling and he couldn't sleep. And he realized, I can figure out exactly where this fly is. If I look at this line and this line, I can give directions and follow the path of the fly, right? I could say everywhere that this fly had been. And that was his inspiration for the graph. So I enjoyed drawing that little picture and telling you that little story. I hope you're well. I miss you. Love you guys. Stay safe, stay well, and let me know if you have any questions about this.